Talking about the broader issue here, I mean, if you're confident all the checks and balances were followed, then why are there so much PPE from so many different companies that was never used? Why was £9 billion wasted if all the correct checks and balances were carried out?
Well, there's this wider point about the scale of the PPE that was ordered. And what the government was doing was working against what we describe in government as the reasonable worst case scenario. So in a rapidly moving situation, and remember, again, going back to the height of COVID, countries around the world were trying to grapple with where this was going. So we made sure that we ordered large amounts of PPE in order to meet the reasonable worst case scenario. Now, thankfully, that didn't transpire. So it did mean that we had more PPE than was required. But I think that was the correct balance for the government to get in this situation.
But are you proud that you ended up with £9 billion wasted?
Well, first of all, I would dispute the waste number. But the overall principle that we ordered to the reasonable worst case scenario, I think is what your viewers would expect us to do, to make sure if we didn't know quite where this virus is going, just like other countries around the world, we made sure that we got the maximum amount available, and that's exactly what we did.
Some experts would say actually you had to order in such a panic like that because the government wasn't properly prepared at the beginning. But I want to address a different element of this, though, is where people with political connections were able to be fast-forwarded in what was known as the VIP lane. Now, there were a number of Conservative politicians who were the sources of referrals into that VIP lane for people who then did get commercial contracts. That has created claims of cronyism on quite a broad scale. On reflection, would it have been better not to use that approach? Because it has left you open, and other Conservative politicians open, to claims of cronyism, that basically contracts for PPE were being doled out to the government's mates.
Well, what I should say, first of all, that is categorically not the case. In terms of the perception point, of course, one can always look back with hindsight on these things. But
it's important.
But what I would say in respect of this was, the government's intention in respect of that was to make sure that if legitimate claims came forward, we processed them quickly. There were no favours or special treatment. Everyone had ultimately the same tests applied to them. And indeed, if it is the case where allegations of fraud and misconduct have occurred, there's either the civil or criminal, which you can see going on in respect of the interview that you've just broadcast. In addition to that, we set up the Public Sector Fraud Authority, which already in its first year has recovered double its initial target. And we've recovered specifically over £130 million worth of fraud. And that's what we're doing already. And of course, there'll be more to come through the pipeline.
So you think